Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Terminal Vocation. Glad you're back with us. We're excited to talk today about fighting.
Yay!
Not to do it, but to just talk about it.
I hope
talk
so.
about ways, hopefully, that we can prevent it. I don't think we're so naive that we think that people will never not have conflict with each other, but hopefully we can talk about what causes it, what are some ways to do it more humanely, and maybe just some ways to kind of get past it and make it not a lingering issue within your relationship with your significant other. But first, what's going on with you? How was your week?
So far, so good. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, so that's always fun. Lots of sugar going down in our school, which is fantastic.
The teachers are eating a lot of sugar?
Oh my gosh. We're getting a lot of candy and treats and stuff. And then I just had my last RE class of the year for my little stoic 7th graders. So we played games outside and they seemed to like that. They seemed to have found their voices when we were outside. So that was
Just
good.
in time.
Just in time for the year to end. No, they were wonderful. They were wonderful, if quiet.
Good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Good.
What about you?
I think one of the neatest things this week was over the weekend I went to a community theater play.
Yeah.
Community theater is always, hit and miss.
Could be dicey.
It can be dicey, but there was a production of Frozen. And there was 3 kids from our youth group that were in it. And one dad of a couple
love
of the
that.
kids.
Yes.
And it was just so neat. One, to support the kids, and they all came up afterwards because none of them knew I was going to be there. And so when they came from backstage to see their friends and family and saw me, I was like, Mark, you're Deacon Mark. So it's just neat to surprise them, but then also just see how excited they are that you cared to come out. But the dad, I got to tell you, this is a dad who, I see him at Mass, and he's taking care of his kids, and he's a good dad, and he's an attentive dad, but he's a rocket scientist, literally works
Right.
for Blue Origin, and he's up there. He was, I forget all the characters. He was Kristoff, so he was, the sort of the one who ends up with Anna in the end, and so it was a pretty major role. And he's singing, and he's good.
Love it.
And he's dancing, and he's good. It was just, it's so fun to see when people surprise you.
Man of many talents.
It was. And he's told me afterwards, he said one of his employees from work had been there the night before. So this is someone who he manages, and he's like, yeah, it was a little awkward. Seeing someone that you see in a very different context at work, and they're seeing you, probably it's neat for them too.
Yeah.
But they're also seeing you in a way that's maybe a little bit vulnerable, right? Because you're doing something that's so off the difference. So, well, like I said, we're going to chat today a little bit about, fighting, but wanted to touch on one thing in the news this week because, for those that don't know, our son is in the aviation industry. Mm-hmm. He works in an airport. So anytime there's big airline, airport, aviation news, it always kind of hits me anyway. But this week, a lot of people have been talking about Spirit Airlines.
Going under.
I think on Saturday Night Live the other night during Weekend Update, they're like, Spirit Airlines shut down, 3 hours into a flight to LaGuardia, as if they just, went down in flames. But this, there's an article on CNN that I was reading, and this was by Chris Isidore on CNN. We'll put a link in the show notes about the editorial itself, but he concludes that the overarching problem is not the business model and the low-cost provider. I mean, there's other low-cost provider airlines who are not out of business today, but he says it's the lack of customer service. People want low cost,
sure,
but they don't want the lack of all the other things that come with it, and so he sort of concludes, well, people thought they were just paying less for the same service, but they were actually paying less because they were getting a different service.
Sure.
And so I think, full disclosure, I've never flown on Spirit. I don't think you have either. So we haven't experienced the spirit life. um, the fairs never enticed me enough because I think whenever you would go to them, it would say like well, checking a bag, carrying on a bag,
Sure.
Having a seat assigned. Everything was just a little bit more.
Yeah, not worth it. And I feel like for us, customer service is a big topic in our family.
Right.
We've all had jobs in customer service, but you did a long career in customer service. And so we have equated that with so many areas in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I even started like an outline of a book or blog or something. Maybe I'll get back to it someday, called Customer Service Parenting. Because I think parenting there's a lot of, this customer service aspect to it. And we always want to say the customer is always right. But for anyone that's worked in customer service, we know the customer's not always right.
Mm-hmm.
You always kind of have to make them somehow feel like they are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in terms of parenting, what I was thinking, or the equation or the analogy that I was making to parenting is really, kids come to you and there's something that they want to do on the cheap. They want to do something a little bit easier. They want to take this off or that off, right? So imagine you've got a kid who's, first chair viola, but they don't want to practice tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, Thursday afternoon, they come home crying because Susie challenged them for first chair and won because they weren't as sharp as they would have been. And so if you're not having those conversations with your kids when they want to make a certain decision about what the peripheral consequences of that decision are, then you're not providing customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And you're letting them just think that the customer is always right and they should be able to have it all.
Right. And I think that's it. They never come to you and say, Mom and Dad, I'd like to practice 5 more hours a week. Can you help me get that time in? Right. They're not asking for more. They're
not
typically, not always. I should never say always, but often it is a shortcut. It is something like that. And it's, laying down that rule about what's not good for them. It reminds me, I feel like last Christmas, our kids all came home from various places and all revealed that they really wish that I had forced them to stick with the piano and the violin and all those instruments that we fought over forever. And I was like, at some point, I just said, finish off this set of lessons and we'll be done. I just can't take it anymore.
Yeah. And that was always our rule in terms of, anything they tried, you were never allowed to quit mid-season, or
right.
mid-whatever. You had to finish out. But we didn't usually force them into continuing it because I think we both understood, there's an exploration, right, where we're trying to see what we like and what sticks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's then sometimes that regret. Oh, I wish I had done.
I wish I had done that. Yeah,
and that's important. It's obviously probably a tangent kind of topic, right? But is that what did I say, like 10,000 hours of something to become expert in it? And so a lot of times the frustration that you feel in that first season is because you just haven't, broken through that first plateau yet to really get to a point where you desire to keep going because you're starting to see some fruits from it. The other analog or thing that I think a lot of parents deal with that I kind of saw was the cell phone, right? So kid, agrees to all of your conditions for having a cell phone, right? So they agree to pay the lower price on Spirit, or they agree to your conditions for having the cell phone. But then 2 weeks later, when you say, okay, well, remember the agreement was, that's my phone. I get to see what sort of texts you're sending or apps you have installed or what, and what do you mean you're looking at it? Well, this is what we agreed to. So having that that level of customer service where they're not surprised when the other conditions kick in.
Mm-hmm. So you're not surprised when Spirit charges you more for a bag or doesn't give you peanuts on the flight or whatever it is.
Whatever the thing is. Yeah,
this is what I agreed to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm sure we've been at airports. We've seen people arguing with gate agents and everything. I'm sure there's people that think somehow they're going to get either past those rules or
get the upgrade.
I deserve it.
Right.
I'm great.
Right.
So, Yeah, so I think that's, so just remembering that, the real customer service isn't caving in to a customer's unreasonable demands, right? Ultimately, you work for the company you work for, and we as parents, right, we work for the company that is our kids' long-term success, not their short-term happiness. And so we have to create an environment where they understand the choice, but also understand the consequences and guide them to choosing what's best.
And letting them have the consequences of a poor choice.
Yeah, not shielding them from that, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, if every gate agent for Spirit Airlines took every sob story passenger and didn't charge them for bag fees or didn't charge them, they would have gone under years and years ago, right? That's the only way the financial model worked, was those additional fees.
So you're not the parent then that calls in and says, what do you mean my child does not have first chair viola?
Well, and you work in the schools. You've seen parents who go to bat for their kids in all kinds of ways that are probably not in their kids' best interest.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
More on that later.
Well, let's talk about the exciting topic that we really want to dig into.
Yes.
It's time to talk about fighting.
Let's talk about it.
So the Stanley Cup playoffs are going on. So, I'm a huge hockey fan.
Yes.
I used to play hockey until the ER visits were more frequent than actual games that I was playing in. But I was, thinking the other day about this idea of penalties, right? And I also love the band Five for Fighting, and their name is literally because that is what the penalty is for fighting in hockey. It's a 5-minute major penalty. And there's differences between major and minor penalties. We won't get into that. But it's 5 minutes that you're out of the game.
It's a long time.
It is a long time, and it's a detriment to your team. Now, it's also part of the game. At some point, teams have decided it's worth it, to incite the team or get everybody excited. And usually it's two guys dropping their gloves. So they usually offset, right?
Sure.
It's usually both people
teams
are having to go to the sin bin and take some time out. But it's interesting, there's even a lower penalty. So if you don't take your gloves off, that's sort of the barrier, like everyone says, dropping the gloves. If you keep your gloves on but you're still fighting, it's called roughing. But it's still a 2-minute penalty.
Yeah. You still get a little timeout.
You still get a little timeout.
You need
right?
to calm down.
So, yeah. But then every now and then you'll hear the announcers talk about, like, oh, looks like Ovechkin and Crosby are having a little discussion over in the corner. And it's interesting that something will happen on the ice and two players will just kind of be in each other's faces a little bit. And you can tell something happened they didn't like, but it's too important a part of the game for either of them to risk taking a penalty, being off the ice, and hurting the team. And so they're letting their feelings be known to the other one without doing what's going to take a penalty. And I think that's a really interesting analogy in relationships to say, well, that's kind of where we need to live when there's disagreement, is that level where we say, there's a disagreement here. We're going to have a conversation. It might be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's not at the level where there's dropping the gloves, where there's a penalty, where there's something that's detrimental to the team.
It reminds me of, I think it is not us saying, we'll discuss this in the car on the way home and making everybody uncomfortable. But I think it is knowing, we have a method of handling this in our family. We have, we'll talk about some of these, I'm sure, but like we'll have a monthly sit down. Maybe we will discuss it kindly in the car on the way home, but having the faith that we're in a marriage and we are going to work this out, and having that trust as opposed to sort of that passive aggressive, like, we'll talk about this later.
Which might be true, but sometimes
not with that tone.
So what I wanted to do today was kind of take this idea of 5 for fighting, and instead of it being a 5-minute penalty, we're going to talk about 5 rules for fighting. And ideally, if you prefer, you would say 5 rules for discussions, 5 rules for disagreements.
It's okay. We can use fighting.
So, rule number 1: I think it's a good one. Don't assume malice where ignorance might be a perfectly logical explanation. I think I've heard other people use this term before, this phrase before. So, shout out to others. I think I've heard like the guys on the Pillar have used this phrase sometimes, Shady and Ed. So tip of the hat there. But I think sometimes we do something or say something stupid. Sometimes we're just intending it to be a joke. And it might have even been a joke if we had said it yesterday. But for whatever reason, it's just not the time or the place for that person to hear it
Read
right
the
now.
room.
But it doesn't mean that we said or did it because we wanted to hurt the other person.
I think that's clear, but not always in the moment. Why would he say that? Right? Like those are the thoughts we have. It's like, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that is very true. But I think when things get heated, it's harder to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You forget that, oh wait, this is the person I love the most in the world who really is working for my salvation and trying to help me. But right in the moment, it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. So I think the more we can remember that, the more we can kind of focus on that on the regular, ideally like when we're not in discussions, if we're having times where we just remember that this person loves us and we love them. And just really, it's a good rule, not just with our significant others, but really with anybody that we encounter. When we get our Starbucks order and they didn't use soy milk or
whatever it is,
it could just be that they just misread the label and not that they wanted us to suffer with our lactose intolerance, right? So,
and I think sometimes just realizing like we are not perfect either, and gosh, if I worked for Starbucks, how many orders would I mess up? So a little, it doesn't mean you don't fix it or whatever, but yes.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Yep. I'm agreeing. So not necessarily malice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good point, kind of what you just said, like, it doesn't mean that there's not a fix that needs to happen. So just because, I said something dumb and I want you to not assume malice doesn't mean there isn't still maybe an apology that I need to make, oh, okay, I can see how that was, misinterpreted or just insensitive in the moment because of what was going on. There could still just be a reality that just because it wasn't malicious intent doesn't mean there wasn't hurt.
Sure. And I think that's where that language that we always hear, any therapist or self-help book says, like, when you say X, I feel Y. And it's so stilted, but I think it is helpful if we can get to that point in the conversation. When this happens, I feel this way.
Yeah.
So I find that to be a good antidote, if I can remember to do it.
Yeah, it is sort of awkward language, but I think the better we get at it, the less it feels like, oh, they're giving me the I message now.
Right.
Like if you really try and make a habit out of it, it doesn't feel as like that. Okay, rule number 2. And this really is especially important with longer relationships and enduring relationships. Figure out how your significant other best handles these types of conversations.
Oh, this took us a while to figure out.
This did take us a while.
This took me, I'm going to say, I'm not even going to throw you under the bus. I feel like you, especially when we were first married, if there was a disagreement, you would think on things.
Yeah.
And I think because you did not want to misspeak or say something mean, maybe, right? But the silence would go on a long, long time. And I am a person who more knows what she thinks by talking, which is not always a good thing, but sometimes it works. And so those two things were really at loggerheads, I think, when we first married, because we would have a problem and I would want to talk about it. And maybe I started off not being frustrated or not being not being angry. But the longer you were quiet, the more frustrated I got.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to realize that, okay, there's got to be a middle, like he does get time to think. That's fair. And there does have to sort of be an ending to that time. Like, I need to understand, is this a thought that you're going to have all night long and we'll talk in the morning? Is this a thought that you kind of need a minute? Like where, like, I think once we establish kind of a time frame, that was helpful for me.
Yeah, and I think that's important. It was certainly something that I had to learn, because I think it can often get interpreted the person with a more volatile personality that it seems like, they're the one who's escalating everything. But no, like, silence can seem like the silent treatment. It seems passive aggressive. And so, figuring out that happy medium of saying, I need a little time to think. But at some point I have to risk just talking and saying something imperfectly. And then that's where the, hopefully you don't assume malicious intent, kind of going back to rule number 1. So that as I'm talking, like, okay, I haven't fleshed these words out as much as I would have liked. Because I think what ended up happening for us a little bit was then I started trying to adapt and talk more quickly. And I started to adopt a little bit more of a volatile discussion style. And I think then that became, uncharitable. I just looked for ways to get into the fight, and and we'll talk about the idea of winning is not the thing later on, but but I think sometimes you just want to, well, okay, if we're going to get into it, let's do it.
The gloves are coming off.
Yeah, exactly. So so I think then the antidote or the corollary, figuring out how the other one does this is just saying, okay, how do we figure out those timing? How do we let somebody, and it might mean that the person who's quiet has to kind of take that initial brain dump of the person who kind of needs to get it all out at the beginning. Because that's, a real thing in terms of how that person is processing it is, I'm feeling this right now, and so I need to say it right now.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think both sides, right? Because then there's like, I need to calm down before I talk. I need to think a little bit before I start spewing. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely work on both sides of that.
So that, I just mentioned this a minute ago, but rule number 3, don't keep score. Right? And not just don't keep score, but really give up the idea that anybody is scoring at all. So not just that we're not tracking it, but that actually there isn't really any concept of a winner.
Yeah.
When we're having these discussions, right? What good does it do to win the argument if that means that you've beaten the person that you say that you love more than anybody else in the world? It's a real backwards kind of thinking.
At what cost that comes. Yeah. I think one way that I struggled with this was keeping score in the long run. And so just, we might have a fight, maybe a month later, and I would bring up last month's fight, and it was like, okay, I'm not over that one. So maybe somewhere in that month I could have said, I know we talked about this. I'm still struggling with, or when this happens, I feel, like something hadn't maybe quite got resolved for me there. And I think mine wasn't so much about winning in the moment. It was, I'm having trouble letting go of this. And so still there was some kind of scoreboard in my mind in that way.
Yeah. And that dovetails well into the 4th rule, right? Which is beware of those ghosts of arguments past.
Yeah.
But I think these two really tie in, right? Because when we resolve and forgive each other, those fights should be left behind. But because we're creatures of habit, sometimes we keep doing the same things that are frustrating to that person. And Lord knows, how many times have we had fights about the same thing over and over and over. Like, you talk to anybody that's gone to confession more than once. Like, have you ever confessed the same thing twice?
Yes. Right.
Couples, have you ever fought about the same thing twice?
Yes.
So...
Just twice?
Well, if you've had... My point was, if you've had 2 arguments, you've probably fought about the same thing twice, right? Because we're kind of having the same discussion or fight or roughing bout over and over again. But I think we need to recognize that someone's desire not to make us mad is not always enough to keep them from doing that thing again, right? Because sometimes those habits that we've been doing longer than we've been in that relationship. Right?
Yeah.
We're all like, products of our upbringing and our, families of origin and all those sorts of things. So we've kind of learned certain ways to fight, to interact from growing up. And so those things get really ingrained. And when we start having an argument, we start to go to like, I forget what they call you, like lizard brain, kind of like very instinctual kind of things, which are going to go back to things that were kind of hardwired into us from a very early age. And those things are really hard to get rid of, to overcome, to break those habits.
Yeah, I think that it is. All of a sudden, I would have moments in arguments with you where I couldn't remember what we were talking about because I'd obviously kind of gone to that like childhood place. Like I was maybe having an argument from 20 years ago, it's still in your head.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what did I just say? You sort of I went on autopilot for a bit, Yeah.
So I think what that brings into play then is sometimes past arguments are in play in the sense that we should have, if we've forgiven, stopped lording it over the other person, and you did this and you did this, and keep bringing it up and accusing them of the same thing over and over and over again. But there is something to the idea that this makes me feel the way that did back then. And you remember how hard that was for me to overcome, how difficult that was for me to process. And so drawing a parallel between those two things is not the same as saying, I haven't forgiven you for that thing. It just means that I still feel that way when X, Y,
when
or
this
Z
happens. Right. Yeah, I think that comes from knowing each other, right? Of saying like, this was those influences in my spouse's life. This is what happened. This is why that makes them uncomfortable. It doesn't solve the problem. You still have to work out how you're going to do with it, but hopefully it gives us some mercy as we're dealing with the other person. And I think I alluded to this in the beginning about kind of like that monthly sit down where we talk to each other. And we're going through things in a calm time, hopefully set apart by prayer on either side, so that then you can say, when this happens, I feel, or this argument keeps recurring. What's going on? Can we talk about it? And hopefully, cooler heads prevail because you're not in that instant. So I think trying to avoid some of this, trying to prevent some of this stuff happens in the time between the arguments when you make time, because nobody really wants to revisit that. But hopefully you're meeting regularly to talk with your spouse about these kind of issues and try and learn each other better and prevent some of this stuff in the future.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, the sit down has been a huge boon.
Yeah, and just to give credit where credit's due, that comes from Teams of Our Lady. That was a Catholic couples group that we were involved with for a long time. We can put the link in the show notes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that's one of their requirements, endeavors they call it, that you're supposed to do monthly. And the whole idea of that is really just diffusing some of those situations. And I think that was something that definitely helped us. It helped me, certainly, because I knew that we would be talking at least once a month. We would have some time to talk, and I could say, gosh, I'm not angry now, but I was really frustrated with, or I'm still working on this fight that we had a while ago. So I think that helped. And I think the good news is that we fight a lot less than we did when we were first married. I mean, I think we have, I think those first couple years of marriage for us, that was one thing we really had to figure out with each other, was how to communicate better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had to figure that out. I mean, I think we figured it out pretty well. Relatively quickly. I think we both we've mentioned before that we were both children of divorce, and I think there was this stubbornness in both of us in terms of we really came to the marriage saying we weren't going to let that happen. There was almost kind of something.
We're gonna figure this out or die trying.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of times statistically that sometimes that's very difficult for children of divorce to kind of go into marriages with that a healthier way of relating to their spouse. So I think we had done some work on ourselves for one, but then two, just were a little stubborn. I
hadn't thought about us being stubborn in that way. I thought you were going with the more negative area with that, but yeah, maybe that was stubborn in a good way.
No, like darn it, I'm not gonna. I refuse to fail at this.
Right, we're gonna figure it out.
Steadfast.
Steadfast. I like that better. Let's go with steadfast.
Steadfast. We'll go back. Erase. Go back and delete that. Okay. Fifth rule: the 5 for fighting penalty is a timeout, and by that I mean like recognizing when the conversation has kind of gone maybe a little bit off the rails. And it is time for people to maybe go to the sin bin for a couple minutes to, if the conversation is getting louder, if the conversation is getting less productive, then it might be time for people to kind of go to their corners.
Take a break.
Mix metaphors and use boxing analogy there, I guess. But go take a break. Think about what you want to say. Think about, what is it really in this situation that's bugging you, and come back and say it productively.
And maybe it's not even that night. Like I feel like fights happen at night a lot. Everybody just at some point needs to go to bed.
At least early on, I felt like we had a lot of 1 a.m.
1 a.m. That's no good.
It is, and this is one of the questions that I think couples ask me in marriage prep all the time when we talk about communication and fighting is the never go to bed angry, never let the sun set on your anger kind of thing. And I kind of dispel that. It's like we're not always our best selves at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and some of those happen not because we're necessarily up that late or we don't wake up in the middle of the night and say it's time to fight, but especially once you have kids and someone's up with a crying kid to do a feeding at 2 a.m. and both people are awake and both people are cranky and upset.
And tired.
And something gets said. And that brings me to maybe one of my other, this week's sort of hot take, sort of related to this, but it's a phrase that I coined. Nobody sleeps on the couch. I'm a big believer in this idea that that's. I don't want to say like it originated from sitcoms. I'm sure sitcoms were doing it because it originated from maybe the culture to some degree. But I think we saw it on TV so much growing up that it became a joke.
I was gonna say it's a punchline, right?
It's a punchline. Oh, you're sleeping on the couch tonight. You're sleeping on the couch tonight, and the more and more I've thought about it and talked to people about it, I think that breeds a culture that says when there's something difficult, we separate. And especially when it comes to the bed, the marital bed, which should be part of where the most intimate parts of our lives are shared and when flesh union is shared, it's important that nobody's locked out of that.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that intimate things are happening when you're in the middle of a fight.
Nope.
But it means you're not told that you're not welcome here. This is still your space as much as it is mine. And I've heard some people say, try not to have fights in the bedroom, to leave that as sort of a sacred space. I think that's hard to do sometimes when, there's kids and you need somewhere where you can shut a door or things like that. Right. It's not a bad idea. It's just not always a practical one. But I think there's something healing about you're in an argument. You agree that you both need a good night's sleep, but you lay down next to each other. And I think the physical proximity has a bit of a healing aspect to it as much as the sleep does. Right? Where we just recognize, okay, there's this other warm body next to me.
Even if I'm clutching the opposite side of the bed, facing the other direction. Yeah.
But but yeah, we're both entitled to that space.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when we do anything other than that, then I think we kind of play into a culture of divorce, to not, put too fine a point on it. But, and I just don't think that's a good place to take a garden variety disagreement and escalate it into something like that.
I think the other thing is it's also when you have children, it's a very visible, if that is the code, like, oh, mom and dad are fighting because dad's on the couch. Usually I feel like it's the guy. I don't know if that's really true. But then it's like, oh, mom and dad are fighting. I hope everything's okay. Like that could be very stressful.
Yeah.
We actually had to explain that to our adult kids because I was having trouble sleeping and I was ending up on the couch downstairs or something. I'd be like, it's really just because I'm awake.
That was just insomnia.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not mad. If anything, I'm mad I can't sleep, but I'm not mad at your dad.
I thought you were going to tell the story about when our kids were younger and we were having an argument. And, one of our youngest, one of the twins, went to the oldest and said, are mom and dad going to get a divorce? And it really, it's a natural question. I mean, we laugh about it a little bit.
Sure.
Now it's sort of a family joke because, the older one responded, no, stupid. They're just fighting. And
in his kind way.
But I guess what was sort of good, and maybe this would be the sort of a sixth rule, especially when it comes to fighting in front of kids, was he had been around us or seen us having disagreements, but seen them resolved. Mm-hmm. Right? So sometimes, acknowledging in front of the kids, hey, you heard mom and dad arguing yesterday. We've made up. We're sorry you had to hear that. So that they see that there's resolution, so they have a little bit of stability that was resolved. So he was old enough to have been comfortable that, no, this happens from time to time. And
although probably annoyed by it based on his tone. Probably annoyed by it.
Probably we were too.
Yes. Fighting's never fun.
So, any last thoughts on fighting?
No, I think, again, to restate, I do think with time and learning a person, and being, honest, I guess the last thing maybe I will say is one of the things we talked about sometimes when we apologized is sort of apologizing for our part. There's been very few fights where it's just been my fault or just been your fault, where we've both had to say, like, I'm sorry I said this. I'm sorry I reacted this way. Like there are, it might be 60-40, it might be 50-50, it might be 90-10, but, usually there's two people. I mean, there's always two people involved in an argument. So I think having that accountability to say, here's my side of the street. Here's what I did that helped that along. I think that was helpful for me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was definitely important to both taking some ownership of the disagreement, of not saying what percentage you thought it was on either side. For me.
I did not.
I know you didn't. You never did. But it was just kind of funny as you were saying that. I was like, I thought we weren't keeping score.
I have a flow chart. I mean, I have a graph that explains every fight we've ever had.
Pie chart. This
right.
Is
yours, right. No, I did not keep track that way, but certainly these are the things I should have done differently.
Yeah. My role in this fight was the slice of the pie chart of the people who donate their lottery to charity.
Very small.
This is very small.
Very small.
Sliver. The last thing that I was thinking of as we were talking, and I think I saw something just within the last day or two online. I think you had seen it as well. But there's a guy who's been doing a lot online lately. Arthur Brooks, I think his name, has been talking about marriage. And I saw him talk about this one thing today, and I've heard this image a lot lately. But he was talking about one of the ways to kind of offset disagreements or disharmony in marriage. And obviously a larger marital issue is bigger than just any one disagreement. But his number one antidote, he said, is go have fun together.
Oh, wow.
And I think this is, probably one of the most important things we can probably say and do as people who ultimately are in love each other, is remembering, love is an action, not just a feeling. positively spending time with one another, going out and doing things, going on a date, going out for a walk, going and doing some
running a 5K together,
so
doing
events. Something together, right?
Right.
Doing something that makes you both, happy. And the image that he used, and I've seen this a couple times lately, is you take like the muddy water, right, and it's impossible to filter the mud out of it, right? And we keep talking about something or dealing with something. It's like, well, we're stirring it up, but the mud is still there, and the only way sometimes to clear it out is to just take clean water and just keep pouring more and more clean water into this vessel until all that dirty water is basically just flushed out. And it's a neat image for one, but two, it kind of just reminds us that, just spending positive time together and saying, well, I don't feel like I'm in love with this person. Well, what have you done that is a loving thing to or for them in order to let those feelings follow our actions?
Yeah. Gosh, I love that.
So, well, that's our discussion today. If you've had enjoyed this, please give us a like, a follow. If you have other ideas for topics you'd like to hear us talk about, or if you have other comments about fighting and what you think what other rules do you think we should add to our list, then give us a quick email, terminalvocation@gmail.com. We'll be happy to hear from you. You've been listening to Terminal Vocation, a VoFam production. I'm Deacon Mark, along with my wife and co-host Erin. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again next week.
Bye-bye.